The planet Zaros was a world of shadows and secrets. A dying sun cast a dim violet light over its barren landscape, filling the horizon with the haunting glow of its fading energy. Thick vines and crystal formations blanketed the ground, shimmering faintly in the weak sunlight. The air smelled of decay and mystery, a place where even the bravest explorers had yet to uncover all its hidden truths. Kellen Drake stood on the edge of a rocky cliff, his sharp eyes scanning the vast expanse below. He was alone, except for his guide Nara, a quiet but determined Korath, an alien species with skin like polished silver and eyes that sparkled like distant stars. Kellen had been on many adventures in his time, but Zaros was different. There was a pull here, something ancient that he couldn't shake. It was as if the planet itself whispered to him, urging him to discover its deepest secrets. The sound of Nara's voice broke the silence. "You're going the wrong way again," she said, her tone laced with amusement. "Humans have the worst sense of direction in the galaxy." Kellen turned, grinning. Nara was often amused by his lack of spatial awareness, something he had learned to embrace rather than fight. Her dark blue hair cascaded down her back, a stark contrast to the pale glow of her skin. Her form-fitting black outfit highlighted her strength, though Kellen knew better than to underestimate her. Nara was as deadly as she was beautiful. "Maybe. I just wanted to admire the view," Kellen replied, his grin widening. "I can't help it, the place is breathtaking." Nara rolled her eyes, a gesture that made Kellen chuckle. "The artifact signature is coming from the eastern ridge," she said, her scanner buzzing softly in her hand. "You're heading west, you brilliant specimen of humanity." Kellen shrugged, a playful glint in his eye. "What can I say? I enjoy the journey, not just the destination." She sighed, but there was a flicker of fondness in her gaze as she motioned for him to follow. They made their way across the rugged terrain, their footsteps crunching on the crystalline ground. The silence between them was comfortable, a quiet understanding forged over months of exploring together. They had uncovered ancient ruins, strange technologies, and forgotten treasures, but nothing like what they were about to find. As they reached the ridge, the ground sloped downward, revealing a large stone structure partially buried in the earth. Overgrown with moss and vines, it looked like something that belonged to a distant past, an era far older than the current civilization that occupied Zaros. Nara's scanner beeped rapidly, her eyes widening with excitement. "We're close," she whispered, her voice filled with urgency. "This energy signature, it's unlike anything I've seen before." Kellen's heart quickened. The air around them seemed to thrum with the same energy that danced on Nara's scanner. They approached the structure, its black stone wall standing tall against the alien landscape. It was a temple of sorts, its intricate carvings faded with time, but still intact enough to tell a story. It wasn't just a ruin. It was a relic of something far more important. Nara stepped forward, her hand resting lightly on one of the stone slabs. "This place, it holds something incredible," she murmured. "I can feel it." Kellen, sensing her deep connection to the artifact, nodded. He stepped carefully, his boots crunching on the ancient stone as he moved to the center of the structure. In the middle of the room, a pedestal stood, unmistakably out of place amid the ruin. But it wasn't the pedestal that caught Kellen's attention. It was the sword. The sword was unlike anything Kellen had ever seen. Its hilt was adorned with strange symbols, glowing faintly with an inner light. The blade itself seemed to hum with an energy that was both terrifying and beautiful. Kellen couldn't help but feel drawn to it, as though the sword itself was calling to him, urging him to take hold of it. "What is this?" Kellen whispered, his hand inching toward the sword. He could feel its power in the air, heavy and almost tangible. Nara's voice was filled with disbelief. "This artifact, it shouldn't exist. According to the ancient texts, no one has ever been able to touch it, let alone remove it. Even the most advanced technology has failed." Kellen raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her words. "What makes you so sure?" Nara's eyes never left the sword. "We've encountered weapons like this before. Old, powerful, beyond our understanding. But this one, she paused, her voice filled with awe. This sword was made by a species long forgotten, a civilization so powerful they left their mark across the galaxy, and yet no one could ever claim it. Kellen glanced at Nera, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. No one, huh? Without warning, Kellen stepped forward and wrapped his fingers around the hilt of the sword. A shock of energy surged through his body, causing him to stagger back, his heart racing. The sword pulsed with a blinding blue light, arcing across the room like lightning. The stone beneath his feet trembled, and the air around them hummed with a strange, vibrating force. Nera gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kellen stood frozen, holding the sword in his hands. The energy coursing through him was overwhelming, but it felt right, as if the sword had been waiting for him, for a human. It was as though a long-lost part of him had been awakened, connected to something ancient and powerful. "I haven't done anything yet," Kellen said, his voice steady despite the rush of power surging through him. He could feel the sword's energy resonating with his own, as if it was alive and responding to him. The sword slid easily from its stone prison, its glow intensifying with every moment. It felt as though the weapon had chosen him, and in that moment Kellen understood that this was no ordinary artifact. This was the key to something much greater than either of them could comprehend. Nera's voice broke through his thoughts. "This is impossible," she breathed. You actually removed it." Kellen turned to her, his eyes reflecting the glowing energy of the sword. "I guess I'm full of surprises," he said, his grin widening. As they stood there, surrounded by the ancient ruins, Kellen knew that their journey had just begun. The sword was more than just a weapon. It was a key to unlocking the secrets of the galaxy's forgotten past, and Kellen was determined to uncover those secrets no matter the cost. But in the distance, a low rumble echoed across the valley. The ground trembled, and Kellen knew that their discovery had not gone unnoticed. The hunt for the sword had only just begun, and soon they would be facing enemies far more dangerous than they ever imagined. And Kellen, he was ready. The sword's energy reverberated through Kellen's very bones. As he held it, the power seemed to amplify within him, unlocking something he had never known existed. His heart pounded in sync with the rhythm of the blade's pulse, and for a moment, he could feel the presence of something ancient and profound. The sword wasn't just an artifact. It was alive, connected to something greater than the planet itself. Nera, standing beside him, was mesmerized. She had seen many ancient relics during her time as a guide, but nothing like this. The sword hummed in Kellen's hands as if it were waiting for something, or someone, specific. And now it had chosen him. Her heart raced, and a part of her buried deep within felt an unfamiliar fear. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had read the ancient texts, heard the legends of the blade that no one could lift. But now, here it was, in the hands of a human. "Do you feel it?" Kellen asked, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the strange connection he felt with the blade. Nera nodded slowly, though she didn't speak. Her eyes remained fixed on the sword, as though afraid to look away. The glowing symbols etched along the blade seemed to shift and change, flickering in patterns she couldn't comprehend. She felt a deep stirring inside her, an ancient call, one that echoed through the long-forgotten corridors of the galaxy's history. But she wasn't sure whether this was something to be revered or feared. The ground beneath them rumbled, and Kellen instinctively tightened his grip on the sword. The vibrations were faint at first, but they grew stronger with each passing second. It felt like the entire planet was waking up, reacting to their presence, to the artifact they had just unearthed. Suddenly the jungle around them seemed to come alive. Strange rustling noises echoed through the trees, and the wind shifted, carrying a new scent, something metallic, sharp, and dangerous. Kellen's instincts flared. He turned to Nera, who looked just as alert, her eyes scanning the shadows. "They know we're here," she said, her voice tense. "We have to move now." Before Kellen could respond, the sound of distant engines broke through the air, the unmistakable hum of spacecraft. More than one. The distant rumble became a roar as the ships descended into the atmosphere, their engines shaking the ground beneath them. They were coming for the sword. Kellen's mind raced. They had to get out of here. There was no telling who had detected the energy surge. Zaruk, the ruthless warlord, had been hunting for the blade for years, and Kellen had no doubt that he would stop at nothing to claim it. He glanced at Nara. She looked calm, but Kellen knew her well enough to see the slight tension in her shoulders. "Let's go," Kellen said, his voice firm, as he began to run toward the jungle's edge, Nara following close behind. The sword's glow dimmed as he moved, the light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. It was as if the blade was responding to his every action, guiding him, urging him forward. They ran through the thick jungle, weaving between trees and over crystal outcroppings that jutted from the ground like jagged teeth. Kellen's breathing was heavy, his mind focused entirely on escape. The sound of the ships grew louder, and he knew they didn't have much time before they would be cornered. Nara led them through the dense foliage, her movements swift and precise. She was an expert at navigating the alien terrain, her Korath instincts far superior to Kellen's. But even she couldn't outrun the ships. They would need to find cover, and fast. As they reached a clearing, Kellen glanced back and saw the first of the ships breaking through the clouds overhead. It was massive, its sleek, dark hull cutting through the sky like a predator stalking its prey. The other ships followed closely behind, each one a shadow against the dying sun. Kellen's heart skipped a beat. They were almost here. "Nyera," Kellen said urgently. "Where's the nearest hiding spot? We need to get out of sight." Nyera didn't hesitate. She pointed to the left, where a series of towering crystal formations jutted from the ground. They would provide cover, at least for a short time. Kellen nodded and they changed direction, sprinting toward the formations. The crystals shimmered in the fading light, their surfaces smooth and reflective. As they neared the rocks, Nara stopped and crouched down behind one of the largest crystals. Kellen followed her, his chest heaving with exertion. The sound of the ships was deafening now, and he could hear their engines rumbling overhead, close enough to feel the pressure in the air. Nyra's eyes darted to the sky, scanning for any sign of their pursuers. "We need to be quiet," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the noise. "If they spot us now, it'll be over." Kellen nodded, his hand still wrapped around the hilt of the sword. It pulsed in his grasp as if aware of the danger they were in. Kellen could feel the energy from the blade surging through him, filling him with an odd sense of calm. He focused on the immediate threat, the ships above, the hunters closing. "And they're moving into position," Nara whispered, her eyes narrowing. "They'll search the jungle first, but they'll come for us eventually." Kellen's grip tightened on the sword as the first of the ships descended lower, casting a shadow over the clearing. The glow from the blade flickered in response, lighting up their hiding spot in a soft, blue hue. Kellen's breath caught in his throat as the ship's shadow moved over them, and for a moment, he was sure they'd been spotted. But the ship continued to fly past them, the searchlight scanning the area ahead. Kellen exhaled sharply, his heart still racing. They weren't out of danger yet. But the sword felt like an extension of himself now, as though it could sense the danger and respond accordingly. "We're not safe yet," Nara said, her eyes still on the ship as it passed. "But we've bought ourselves some time." Kellen nodded, still holding the sword close. He could feel the power it gave him, and he knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. They had uncovered something far bigger than a simple artifact, and the journey ahead was going to change everything. The forest around them was silent, but the air itself felt heavy, charged with the energy of the sword. Kellen and Nara remained crouched behind the towering crystal formation, each heartbeat synchronized with the subtle hum of the weapon. The ship overhead had passed by, its shadow dissolving into the distance, but Kellen couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just beginning. The sword had awakened something deep inside him, something he couldn't explain, and with it came the undeniable sense that their actions had set something vast into motion. Nyara shifted beside him, her hand resting on her sidearm. The tension in her shoulders had yet to dissipate. "They'll be back," she murmured, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "This isn't just about the sword anymore. Zarok will never stop hunting for it. If he realizes what we've found, he won't hesitate to bring everything down on us." Kellen knew she was right. Zarok's reputation as a ruthless warlord was well known across the galaxy. He wasn't interested in treasures or artifacts for their beauty. To him, power was everything, and the sword had the potential to grant more power than anyone could imagine. Kellen tightened his grip on the hilt, feeling the faint pulse of energy under his fingers. "We need to move," Kellen said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. "But we can't stay on Zaros. The planet is too dangerous now. If Zarok's forces are already on their way, we'll be trapped here." Nara nodded, her gaze already shifting to the distant horizon. "There's a transport ship hidden to the south," she said. "It's in a ravine, well out of their patrol routes. I've been keeping it under wraps for emergencies like this. If we can reach it, we can get off-world, but we'll have to move quickly." Kellen hesitated for a moment, the weight of the sword making his movements feel heavy. The vision he'd seen earlier, the images of ancient battles and human warriors wielding weapons of unimaginable power, kept replaying in his mind. The sword was part of something much bigger. But what? He didn't have the answers. Only the certainty that time was running out. They had to escape, and fast. "Lead the way," Kellen said, finally breaking the silence. Nyara rose to her feet with a fluid motion, her alien grace making her appear almost otherworldly as she moved through the undergrowth. Kellen followed closely behind, the sword's glow faint but constant, lighting their path in the growing dusk. The crystalline formations of Zaros began to fade into the distance, and the jungle gave way to rocky terrain that led them to the ravine where Nyara had hidden the ship. The trek was grueling, each step carrying them farther from the relative safety of the crystal formations. The weight of the sword in Kellen's hand felt both like a blessing and a burden. The power it contained was undeniable, but he wasn't sure how to control it. It was like nothing he had ever encountered before, and every instinct told him that it wasn't just an artifact. It was a key to something far more significant, something that could change the fate of the galaxy. As they neared the ravine, Nara's steps slowed, her senses alert. "We're close," she whispered, her eyes scanning the darkening landscape. The air was thick with the sounds of distant creatures, their calls echoing off the walls of the canyon. It was eerily quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The transport ship came into view, hidden in the shadows of the ravine's steep cliffs. It was sleek and compact, built for speed and stealth, perfect for evading detection. The ship's hull was covered in a reflective material that blended seamlessly with the natural landscape, making it nearly invisible from above. Nara moved quickly toward the entrance, her fingers dancing over the controls of the ship's hatch. Kellen followed, still aware of the distant rumblings of the ships overhead. Zarok's forces were getting closer, and they wouldn't have long before they were discovered. The sword pulsed once more in his hand as if urging him to hurry. He didn't question it. Every moment they spent here increased the risk of being caught. "Get in," Nara ordered, her voice tight with urgency. Kellen stepped inside, the narrow interior of the transport ship dimly lit by soft blue lights. Nara followed him, and she quickly moved to the cockpit, preparing for takeoff. Kellen settled into the seat next to her, his eyes still focused on the sword in his lap. The symbols along its length seemed to shift again, the energy inside it flaring briefly before settling into a steady, rhythmic pulse. It felt as though the sword itself was guiding them, responding to something deep within the ship's systems, but Kellen had no idea what it meant. "Are you ready for this?" Nara's voice cut through his thoughts. She was focused on the control panel, her fingers flying over the console as she input commands. "As ready as I'll ever be," Kellen replied, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. He could feel the sword's energy growing stronger, as if the ship was resonating with the ancient artifact's power. Naira gave him a brief glance before she initiated the launch sequence. The ship hummed to life, its engines roaring as it lifted off the ground. The ravine walls seemed to close in around them as they shot upward, gaining speed and altitude. Kellen felt the weight of the sword in his hands, the connection between them growing stronger with each passing second. He knew that whatever was coming, the sword was a part of it. "Zaruk won't stop," Naira said, her voice low but filled with resolve. "He'll track us down no matter where we go. But this sword, it's more than just a weapon. It's the key to something much bigger." Kellen's eyes locked on the sword, its glow pulsing softly in the dim light of the cockpit. He didn't understand everything yet, but he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was on the brink of something monumental, and he, along with Naira, was about to be at the center of it all. As they broke through the atmosphere, the dark expanse of space opened up before them, the stars shining like a sea of endless possibilities. But Kellen's thoughts weren't on the beauty of the view. His mind was focused on the sword and the ancient power it held. The galaxy was full of secrets, and Kellen was just beginning to uncover them. They were headed toward the unknown, but one thing was clear. The journey had only just begun. The sword had chosen him for a reason, and he would follow its call wherever it led. As the sleek transport ship soared through the void, the distant stars shimmering like distant beacons of forgotten worlds, Kellen sat in the cockpit, his hand still clutching the sword. The steady pulse of its energy resonated with the ship's systems, almost as though it was alive, breathing alongside him. The symbols along the blade's surface shifted and glowed intermittently, reacting to the hum of the ship's engines. Kellen had no idea what it all meant, but he could feel it. A connection to something vast, something older than anything he had ever encountered. Naira sat at the controls beside him, her eyes fixed on the star-filled horizon. The atmosphere around them had grown tense. The threat of Zaruk's forces still lingered, and even as they made their escape, the feeling that they were being watched, hunted, remained ever present. "Do you feel it?" Naira's voice was low, almost a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might disturb something fragile. Kellen nodded, though he didn't quite know how to articulate what he was feeling. The sword was more than a weapon. It was something else entirely. Its power wasn't just about destruction, it was about connection, about unlocking something that had been hidden from the galaxy for centuries. But why him? Why now? "I don't understand it," Kellen admitted, his voice just as quiet as hers. "It's like the sword is calling me, like it's telling me to go somewhere, to do something." Naira's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not just calling you. It's calling us. It's a force that goes beyond anything we can comprehend right now. I've spent my life studying ancient artifacts, but this..." She paused, her eyes flickering briefly toward the sword. "This is different. This isn't just an object. It's a relic of a lost civilization, one that may have had knowledge and power beyond our wildest imaginations." Kellen turned his gaze back to the sword, the hilt now seeming to pulse with a life of its own. He felt the connection deepen, the blade's glow matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. The ancient symbols seemed to whisper to him, their meanings, shifting like liquid patterns that danced before his eyes. He could almost make out fragments of thoughts, fleeting glimpses of things long past, human warriors wielding swords of light, the rise and fall of an empire that spanned the stars, battles fought in the far reaches of space. "The sword has a history," Kellen murmured half to himself. "But it's our history." Naira didn't respond immediately, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the console as the ship moved deeper, into space. Her expression remained unreadable, but Kellen could feel the weight of her thoughts. The Korath were known for their deep, analytical minds. Naira was no stranger to ancient texts, but even she couldn't have foreseen what they had just uncovered. This sword was the key to something far beyond their understanding, and Kellen knew they had only scratched the surface. Suddenly, the ship's control panel beeped and Naira's eyes snapped to the screen, her fingers flying over the controls. "We've got company," she said sharply. "A fleet. Zaruk's ships, they found us." Kellen's pulse quickened, He looked down at the sword, feeling its energy hum more intensely now, as if it were responding to the new threat. The distant rumbling of engines grew louder, and Kellen could see the faint flicker of ships on the radar. They were closing in fast. Nara's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Get ready. We'll need to outrun them, but we'll have to make it through the outer system first." Kellen felt the weight of the situation press down on him. Zaruk wasn't just after the sword. He was after everything it represented: control, power, dominion over the galaxy. And he wouldn't stop until he had it. But Kellen couldn't let that happen. Not when he knew what the sword was capable of, and what it could mean for humanity's place in the galaxy. "We're not running," Kellen said, a new determination in his voice. He turned the sword over in his hand, the blade pulsing with an energy that felt almost like a heartbeat. "We're going to fight. We're going to make sure Zaruk understands exactly what this sword means." Nara's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of admiration crossing her face. "You're certain?" Kellen nodded. "We're not just fighting for the sword. We're fighting for humanity's future. The galaxy has no idea what's coming. We have to be the ones to lead them." Naira was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the distant ships closing in on them. Then she nodded, a slow smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I've never met a human quite like you, Kellen Drake." The smile vanished quickly as she punched in new commands, sending the transport ship into a sharp, spiraling dive. The ship's engines roared, and Kellen felt his stomach lurch as they plummeted toward the fringes of the outer system. Zaruk's fleet was closing in on them, but they had a head start, just enough to make the first move. "We're going to hit the asteroid belt," Naira said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "The rocks will mask our signatures. If we can make it through, we can jump to hyperspace." Kellen gripped the sword tighter, the glow brightening in his hands. "Let's make sure we don't give them a chance to catch up." As the transport ship weaved through the dense asteroid field, Kellen could feel the sword's power coursing through him, almost as if it were feeding off the danger. His heart raced, and for a moment he almost felt invincible. This sword, whatever it was, had chosen him, and it was giving him the strength to take on anything that came their way. Through the cockpit window, Kellen saw the asteroids whizzing past, their jagged edges flashing in the dim light. The ship shook as it dodged debris, and Kellen could hear the distant fire of energy blasts from Zaruk's fleet. They were closing in fast, but the ship's shields held strong. "We've got one chance," Naira said, her voice tight as she concentrated on the controls. "If we can get through this, we'll be able to jump, but they won't stop. Not now." Kellen nodded. His grip on the sword tightened, and he felt its power surge once again. He had no idea what it was capable of, what it could do in this moment, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to run, not from Zaruk, not from anyone. The sword was his legacy. It was humanity's legacy. As they neared the edge of the asteroid field, Kellen saw a clearing, a narrow gap in the belt. Nara adjusted. The ship's course, her focus absolute. With one last twist of the controls, they shot forward, narrowly avoiding a collision with a massive asteroid. The distant sound of pursuit grew fainter. Kellen dared to look back at the radar, his breath catching in his throat. They had made it, but their journey was far from over. The sword was more than just a weapon. It was the key to a future Kellen wasn't fully ready to face, one that was tied to ancient powers and forgotten histories. But as the ship hurtled toward their next destination, Kellen knew this was only the beginning. He was ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store for him. And with the sword at his side, he was determined to make sure humanity's legacy was one of hope, strength, and unity.